So, talking about trade here, we probably will finish up tomorrow. Okay, I don't think we'll quite get done today. We'll probably finish up tomorrow. We'll see. Okay, so I don't think you guys got this. So keep in mind that when you're talking about categories like trade routes, okay, you need to be able to give examples, okay? And so a trade route such as the Silk Road, okay? And then you need to be able to give an example of what was traded or what traveled along the Silk Road. I know Buddhism's not really traded, but it does travel along the Silk Road. Or you could use, the Mediterranean and Christianity, okay? You could use, that Rome was getting silks from China, okay, and spices from India. So just be ready to give specific examples because I'm saying this because I've graded your SAQ from yesterday. Okay, all right, and so we're gonna have to keep. It's okay. It's expected, but you have to give specific examples. Okay, and some folks are giving kind of general vague statements, and so we're gonna work on that. It's a very common mistake for early AP students to make, but it's deadly on the AP exam though. That's why we do this. All right, now. All right, the Trans-Saharan route. Okay. This is the route that crosses the Sahara Desert. It really develops during this time period here with the introduction of camels. Okay, there was some trade before camels were introduced, like in the early classical period and also in the foundations period. But camels are what allowed trade to really boom across the desert because they can carry so much more. And Unfortunately, though, I don't have it up here, but slaves will be an unfortunate product that it will be exported out of Africa. The Africans themselves, they want salt. Okay? They want salt. So North Africans, Berbers coming south through the desert would pick up salt and at these big, huge salt lakes. And we'll look at a video later this school year. It's kind of cool looking. They carve it up, and it looks like kind of like panes of glass, but it's dirty glass. It's not like you can see through it, but it's kind of clear a little bit, and they just hang these big slabs of square cut, rectangular cut salt on the side of these camels. And then they head south to West Africa, to Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, those areas. Okay, moving on here. I think we looked at this, right? Okay. All right. So do keep in mind that the Indian Ocean is generally divided into three zones: your Arab zone, your Indian zone, and your Chinese zone, which simply means that most of the merchants that you find in this Western zone here will be Arab, but they won't be exclusively Arab. There's nobody saying South Asians, you can't come over here, or Chinese, you can't come over here. You will find some, but just not that many because you're further away from their main territory and you're closer to the Arab world right here. Okay. Here, this area will be dominated mainly by South Asians, but again, not exclusively South Asians. And then this will be the Chinese over here. Okay. All right. Now, your Southernization projects that you picked up in here yesterday, okay, will be dealing with a lot of the stuff that you see up here, these products and things like that. And don't forget, what you're going to do is when you see that India is producing cotton, you will have a symbol for cotton, okay, and then in your key, you tell me what that symbol means. Equals cotton right there. These little arrows up here represent some of the trade routes, but you're going to be reading about them in your packet. Okay, moving on here. This shows how connected the world was by these trade routes. So you've got your Silk Road up here. Okay, you've got your Indian Ocean down here. Okay, you've got your Mediterranean. You've got your Trans-Saharan. Okay, right here. They're also using the Nile River as well. And so that's how you could sometimes find products from China all the way down here in East Africa and vice versa. Okay? And then also don't forget this too, monsoons. Monsoons are very important for merchants because the winds blow primarily in a certain direction for several months, and then the winds change and they blow back the opposite direction. Okay, and so if you're a navigator, a merchant, traveling across the ocean, knowing what time to leave is really important because if you leave at the wrong time, you might find yourself out here in the Indian Ocean, and all of a sudden the winds change and it might send you to Antarctica and you're never going to be heard from again. So so monsoons were key here. Okay, moving on here. Now, movements of people in this time period. The Bantu, we've talked about them before. They began moving back in period 1.
But Africa is a big place. It takes a long time to migrate from West Africa down to South Africa. And they're doing the same thing that we've talked about before. They're spreading their knowledge of ironworking or metallurgy. They're spreading their knowledge of farming, including crops like yams and palm oil, and their language. The Polynesians, talked about them. They're still continuing their migrations that had begun back in period 1. So this would be an example of continuity. It's not an example of change. Both of these people started in the prior time period and they continue migrating in this time period. Yes.
So where did the Polynesians originally come from?
Okay, so let's see if I have a map here. There. Okay. So these are the Polynesians, okay? And they began their migrations way back over here. Okay, this is where they started. But now why, we don't know. Okay, we don't know what happened. Okay, were they pushed off the continent? Did they do it on their own? We just don't know. But they look at the dates up here. Okay, so this goes back to early centuries BCE. So again, at least your foundations period for sure. Okay, but let's see here. What all do we have here? So this is that's 4000 BCE right there. Okay, 2000 BCE. Okay, 1500. Okay, they don't get to look at New Zealand. Look at what a time jump this is. You would have thought. I mean, look, they've been in this area. Okay, a 1000+ years. Okay, before Christ. Okay. Okay. Before they're here long before Rome was even started. Okay, and they don't get to New Zealand until after Rome collapses. Okay, all right, they get to New Zealand in 700 CE thereabouts. Okay, do y'all know why? I mean, because it seem like, oh look, they're just so close. Okay, why didn't they just go straight down? They didn't have what? Oh no, they got ships going on. That's how they're getting to these islands right here. What? You're getting close. It has to do with currents. It has to do with currents. Okay. And it's very, very hard to sail directly from here to here down that way. Okay. Notice Easter Island, which is off the screen right over here. Okay. Sometime in 400 CE. Okay. So they got to Easter Island before they actually got to New Zealand, which is kind of crazy. Okay. Then you got Hawaii up here. Okay. In the 1st century BCE. Okay. And then where? Yeah. Let's see. No. Where is it? I missed it. Where is Samoa? There it is, right there. There's Samoa. Okay, right there, 1000 BCE. Just amazing that these people are just getting in, these oversized canoes and sailing, from one place to another and actually reaching land. Kind of makes you wonder how many didn't make it. But anyway, anybody know a famous person of Samoan ancestry? Who? The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Exactly. Can you think he's half? I think he's half Samoan. Okay. Can you know a characteristic of Samoan men?
Yeah.
Not just well, you get okay, tattooing is kind of a common thing, especially like down here in New Zealand, the Maori. But what's another characteristic of Samoan men?
Super large.
Yeah, that's right. They're big. They are big boys. Exactly. Okay. I remember years and years ago when I taught at another school, there was a Samoan boy there in the school, and the coaches were just like, please play football, and he was like, nope, didn't want to. Okay, so he could have been the offensive line all by himself. So anyway, all right, okay. Now going back to this right here. All right, Uh, the Romans, we talked a little bit about this the other day. The Romans are putting their soldiers in faraway places, like on the northern frontier, and up in England. But they're not doing it for colonization. They're doing it for protection. They're putting the soldiers up there to keep the barbarians out. However, what does happen is that these Roman soldiers often marry local girls, okay, have families, and then their children will have some knowledge of Latin and Roman customs. Okay? But they weren't deliberately trying to spread their culture like that. And so, and then in the Eastern Mediterranean, it's Greek is always going to be the dominant language over there in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in Constantinople, they're not speaking Latin; they're speaking Greek, even though they call themselves Roman. They're speaking Greek. Okay. And so here's a word here. Okay. Somebody asked me yesterday, there was a word on the quiz, homogeneous. Okay. What does homogeneous mean?
The same.
Like all the same. What does this mean?
Different.
Different. Okay. Diverse. Good. Somebody had a question?
Yeah. Did this placement of soldiers like require erasure? Did the placement of soldiers?
Oh no, the Romans go in and kick butt, and then they basically put their flag down, build their forts.
They
Okay.
invaded before.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The Romans were big on expansion. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Now over in Han, China. Okay. They are deliberately moving people from northern China to southern China to help spread the Mandarin language, and there's that word right there. They're trying to create a homogenous culture. Yes, there are other languages in China, but not as many as there used to be. And Mandarin's much more dominant than it used to be because of the active policies of the different dynasties. The Han started it, but other dynasties continue it. Now, the Huns, these other Central Asian nomads, we don't know for sure why they went on the warpath like they did. I mean, it was part of their culture to be aggressive, but still to come boiling out of Central Asia to attack China, to attack India, to attack Rome, Europe, basically, something must have been pushing them out. And we don't know what it was, but some people think it had to do with climate change. There may have been a long drought. And remember, these people are herders, okay? And so they may have been looking for, no pun intended, greener pastures. They may have been looking for land where there was more rainfall so their cattle could survive. But we don't know for sure. But anyway, we just know that they did. They did come boiling out of Central Asia. And here are some things that helped them conquer, okay? The stirrup, okay? Do y'all know what a stirrup is? It's on the, okay, you know what a horse saddle, okay, right? Okay, on the sides of a horse saddle, okay, you've got some loops, okay, down there at the bottom, and that's where you can put your feet, okay. But the cool thing about a stirrup is that it will allow you to stand up in the saddle, okay. You can press your weight against the loops that your feet are through, okay, and that lets you stand up. And standing up in the saddle is an advantage because if you think about it, you've got a bow and arrow, okay. I mean, dude, you're sitting down right now. Can you imagine pulling a bow and arrow and trying to fire behind you? I mean, just trying to twist around while you're seated it's not easy, okay? And you don't have full range of movement. But if you're standing up, okay, you can easily twist almost all the way around and shoot back over your shoulders that way, okay? And they had this thing called a compound bow. A compound bow is different from a longbow. Like the English longbow is taller than I am. Okay, all right, and they were very powerful. But the problem is, if you've got a longbow and you're on a horse, can you imagine? You're riding a horse with this long bow right here, and you're trying to turn around. You're going to be poking that horse. Okay, all right. It's not going to be. But a compound bow is like this. It's about that long. Okay, and y'all know how they're made. Y'all should look it up. It's pretty cool. It's not like one single piece of wood. It's layers of wood and also bone and sinew. Okay, because again they had animals, okay, cattle, and they would use like they would basically make kind of a glue from the horse's hooves and things like that, and then layer this stuff in, and that gave these compound bows a lot of power, very powerful. Okay, moving on here. Germanic barbarians are going to invade the Roman Empire because they are being pushed by the Huns. Those poor Germans were caught between a rock and a hard place. They had the Huns to their back and the Romans to their front. However, what they realized was that Rome had become weak. We've talked about the diseases, for example, okay, that caused population decline, which caused, a lack of taxes to pay soldiers and pay for weapons. And so these German barbarians who are basically running away from the Huns, okay, and they're running into the Romans, which, by the way, they had been fighting the Romans for a long time, and the Romans used to be extremely powerful and strong. But now they realize, oh, wait a minute, the Romans aren't so strong after all. And so the German barbarians, they're like, let's get away from the Huns and let's go take from the Romans. Let's go loot, steal, okay, take from them. All right, here's your Bantu migrations. Notice it says 500 BC to about 1500 CE right there. So they've been on the move for a very long time. Remind me again, what technological advantage do the Bantu have? Ironworking. Good. Okay. All right. All right. Now then, the Mayans. Okay. You guys had human geography last year. Can y'all tell me what this is? What? Terraced farming. Very good. Terraced farming. Okay. You can find terraced farming in different areas of the world. You typically find it wherever you have what? Not water. Hills. Yeah, hills and mountains. Okay. Because if you're a farmer, farming on the side of a hill or a mountain's not real easy. Okay. And water tends to just run straight down. So what they do is they simply carve that hill or that mountain kind of like a layered cake. You can see the steps right here. And so now when it rains, okay, the water stays, okay, right here and has time to soak into the ground like that. Okay, so the Mayans used terrace farming, the Chinese used terrace farming. It's not a unique thing. This is a Mayan pyramid down here. Do y'all know anything about this right here? Anybody ever seen? You might know what happens when the sun gets, what you can't see it very well, but there's a snake head right there. Okay. And when the sun comes in, you can kind of see it starting. It causes like this rip. It looks like a snake coming down the side of the pyramid, the way the sun's shadow is cast right here. Okay. All right. So the Mayans. This civilization was at its height, at its peak between 250 and 900 CE. From the time the Romans were pretty strong to the time the Romans were collapsing, and then they have collapsed, and Europe's trying to get back on its feet. The Mayans were doing just fine. You can find Mayan culture civilization in Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala. Those are the main areas of Mesoamerica where you can find their ruins. Okay, the type of government they had was city-states. So there was not one single Mayan emperor who controlled everything. Instead, it was actually a whole lot like the Greeks. Okay, just like you had Athens and you had Sparta. Remind me again, what were Athens and Sparta always doing? Fighting who? Yeah, same thing here. Okay, same exact thing here. Now they also used slash and burn agriculture. Okay, just like the Bantu did. That wasn't new. They also used terrace farming. They did develop irrigation systems as well. And their primary crops, you've got a vocabulary word, and that vocabulary word is staple. Okay. So a staple product or a staple crop is something that people in that area depend upon. It's like a main thing. And so corn, beans, and squash, okay, those were like the staple crops of the Mayan civilization. That's what people ate, pretty much at all meals. Yes, sir.
And in this area also have like gemstones and stuff.
Do they have gemstones?
Because I've seen on a few maps.
They probably did. Yeah. Um, okay, stone tools. So in other words, they're not working with metal. Now these pyramids, okay, were very closely tied to astronomy. Okay? They observed the heavens, they observed the stars. Has anybody ever heard what some of these Mayan kings did as as a religious practice?
Sacrifice people.
They did that, but they also, in a sense, kind of sacrificed themselves. I don't mean they killed themselves. They did not do that. Um, but they would pierce their tongues, and I'll just say other parts of their body. We won't need to get into the details. Okay, you young men wouldn't like it. Okay, but they would actively put needles through their tongues, and then that blood, okay, was considered to be like as a way to communicate with the gods, like that. So yeah, some pretty strange stuff. Okay, you can go look all that kind of stuff up. That's the things that they don't write about in your school books. Okay. Okay, I tell you what, let's knock off for the day. We're almost done here. We will definitely finish tomorrow. Okay.